to our show that is called Real Shame. It's a show where us two guys, me and him and me, watch movies from our movie list of shame or movie blind spots. Basically, movies that we haven't seen, but we're fixing that for you today. I'm Adam.
I'm Andy.
And this week we're watching some movies that I haven't seen. And why don't I toss it over to Andy to introduce the first movie of this week?
Alrighty, Guido Anselmi is supposed to make a big science fiction film, but he suffers from director's block. It's like writer's block, but for filmmakers. He attempts to take time off to relax at a luxurious health spa, but is cornered constantly by producers and actresses and all these people that are in the movie-making business. And he must also deal with the various women in his life in 8½.
Sono qua! Vuole che parliamo del film?
Sì, certo.
Bene, allora mi dirà poi lei se questa relazione dovrò mostrarla anche al suo produttore. Francamente non vorrei farle avere delle noie.
No, non si preoccupi, l'ho chiamata io.
Vede, ad una prima lettura salta agli occhi che la mancanza di un'idea problematica, o se si vuole di una premessa filosofica,
Vogliamo sederci?
rende il film una suite di episodi assolutamente gratuiti. Può anche darsi divertenti nella misura del loro realismo ambiguo. Ci si domanda cosa vogliono realmente gli autori. Ci vogliono far pensare, vogliono farci paura. Il gioco rivela fin dall'inizio una povertà di ispirazione poetica. Mi perdoni, ma questa può essere la dimostrazione più patetica che il cinema è irrimediabilmente in ritardo di 50 anni su tutte le altre arti. Il soggetto poi non ha neanche il valore di un film d'avanguardia, benché quella ne abbia tutte le deficienze.
So 8½ is directed by Federico Fellini, obviously one of the most famous Italian filmmakers that has ever lived. Before 8½, he made movies like La Strada, Nights of Cabiria, and La Dolce Vita in 1960. Why is the movie called 8½? Well, before this, Federico Fellini had made 6 feature films. He had directed 2 segments of basically an anthology film, and then he co-directed a film with another person. So if you take the 6 feature films, you add the 2 kind of short segments that he did together to make 7, and then you have a half a film where he was co-director with another guy. So you've got 7½. This movie makes 8½. That's where the title comes from, in case you were wondering. This movie was written by Federico Fellini, Tullio Pinelli. I looked up Tullio Pinelli to see what else he's done, and I just was struck by the fact that he lived to be 100 years old. I want whatever he was eating. Tullio Pinelli lived to be 100. Also co-written by Ennio Flaiano and Brunello Rondi. And all those guys, Tullio Pinelli, Ennio Flaiano, and Brunello Rondi had all worked with Fellini before on some of his prior films. And the music score for this movie is done by Nino Rota. Nino Rota did a lot of movies, a lot of Italian movies scores, but he also did Godfather 1 and 2, which we have done on this show. And he won an Academy Award for Godfather 2. The movie stars Marcello Mastroianni. Marcello is, I think, probably the most famous Italian actor that's ever lived. He plays the lead role, Guido Anselmi. Anouk Aimee, who had been in La Dolce Vita, Fellini's La Dolce Vita in 1960, plays Marcello's wife in this film, Luisa Anselmi. She is still alive. She's 90 years old.
Wow.
Sandra Milo plays Guido's mistress, Carla. She's still alive. She's 89 years old. Barbara Steele plays an American, I believe Barbara Steele is American, but she plays an American, kind of the girlfriend of one of Guido's friends. She plays Gloria Morin. She's still alive. She's 84. You're sensing a theme here? They're all still alive, except Marcello's not still alive, unfortunately. And then finally we have Claudia Cardinali plays Claudia, or the ideal woman. She's still alive. She's 84. So all these women live to be, so far, in their mid to late 80s or early 90s. And then finally, another person that sadly passed away is Madeleine LeBeau. She plays the aging actress Madeleine. In this movie, we have seen her before. She's in Casablanca. She's in a very small role in Casablanca. She plays Yvonne in that film. And weirdly enough, she got married to one of the screenwriters of this movie, the guy that lived to be 100, Tullio Pinelli, back in the late 80s. So over 20 years after this film was made, she married Tullio Pinelli until he passed away at age 100. All right. So this is a film that I have seen, I believe, 2 times before. So this is my 3rd viewing. This is a movie that you've never seen. I know you know who Fellini is. I know you know what La Dolce Vita is.
I do. We have a big movie poster of La Dolce Vita. Although
Right.
I've never seen La Dolce Vita.
Right. Well,
And I thought I've seen a Fellini movie, but this is my first. Because I thought he did the Fahrenheit 451 movie back in the 70s.
that's
but
Truffaut. Yeah.
that's Truffaut. So different continent, different director, all that kind of stuff.
That's okay.
But foreign name to us Americans. So that shows you how cultured I am, at least.
Yeah. So, what did you know about? First of all, can you count to 8.5 using your fingers? I got a knife around here somewhere. Right? No. What did you know about 8.5, if anything? Before you went into it?
I know it was pretty well. I know it's pretty well acclaimed. But the thing that struck me the most, or the thing I remember the most about it, is it's a movie about the filmmaking process, and that's what made me really excited to want to watch it. And something I've been actually on my list and known about for a while that I've been wanting to watch. I will say, so I kind of put this in my notes as a little bit of a metaphor. I think there's a spectrum for movies about what it takes to make film, right? You have documentaries, which is a look into exactly or kind of what happened of the making of the movie, and that kind of goes into Wednesday's what we're going to talk about Wednesday. But then there's also movies that are about the filmmaking process, but not about the filmmaking process, which will a lot of people cite, like movies like Inception or like The Prestige, and Nolan films a lot, where it's about like the theory and the ideas about the basic kind of idea and theory that is about filmmaking. So, and I feel like this movie is a dramatic. It is a dramatic telling of what it is to make a movie. So it's more on the dramatic side, not definitely Inception or that side, but it's more dramatic on that end. And I was not expecting that in this movie. I really thought it was going to be about Fellini. Fellini was going to be, the main focus. I was thinking it's going to be something along the lines of like, the telling of the Don Quixote that Terry Gilliam had so much trouble with, or something along those lines is what I was kind of expecting. So I was kind of taken aback a little bit that it wasn't it was fictional, not non-fictional, right?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I knew going into it. I thought it was going to be a fictional, like a documentary look at filmmaking, but I knew it was filmmaking focused. And then other than that, I really didn't know much and just kind of went into it blind.
So
I'm torn on this movie. I feel like I say that a lot because there's aspects of the movie that I think are really interesting, and for me, the stuff that gets the most interesting to me is when we start getting into filmmaking mode, and like when we're visiting the set that's the rocket ships, and they have the matte painting that's going to be in the foreground, and all the backgrounds, all this scaffolding and stuff like that. So actors and people can be in different spots where it looks like on the camera film that they're on the rocket ship or working on it, but in reality they're on this this elaborate scaffolding and stuff like that. And when we start getting into like not the nitty-gritty details, but when we start getting into the details of the filmmaking, the movie really kind of captivates me and it's more interesting. I know a lot of times when we talk about movies, my biggest complaint is that I don't feel like we ever get a good view of the interior monologue, what the main character is thinking, and for me, that's paramount for me watching movies, knowing kind of where the main character is on each and every level. This movie, you get that, right? Because you get all these flights of fancy, you get all these kind of daydreams where it kind of goes into it. But for me, so it's like almost like it's a double-edged sword for me, because I feel like I love this stuff, but for me, it kind of went into maybe we're getting too much and maybe it's a little self-indulgent. So all the flight of fancy stuff, it just kind of felt random sometimes, and it really felt like we're spinning our wheels, and I'm like, why are we watching this? Like, this is not as interesting or as captivating to me, of him kind of working through his anxiety, or working through all this different, basically his life and all that kind of stuff leading into this next feature film. So I can appreciate aspects of it, but I'm not in the like Scorsese camp of like this is the best movie ever made, and all those other filmmakers, and probably that's why I'm not a filmmaker, is maybe because I don't have it's not as beloved to me. But that's kind of where I sat with it. I there's aspects of it I thought were cool and interesting and I liked, but a lot of the the flight of fancies, the daydreaming, I couldn't really get behind. And we spent a lot of time on his love life and like him coming to that reckoning of him dealing with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from what I've read, that's a little autobiographical for Fellini.
If he was carting around women like Claudia Cardinale, he's a lucky guy.
Yeah, well, true. But it's just like, it just felt too much. Like the whole scene with them, like, I guess where it's like, almost like a, I was going to say like a harem of like different women at different ages and all that kind of stuff. I was just like, that just didn't really speak to me when we were doing that.
It speaks to me. That's totally what my life is like, bro.
So, and I know this is like a, I'm trying to find the right word for it. It's more of like an expressionless kind of movie. It's more, and that stuff doesn't really work for me. So I'm torn. I want to like it. There's aspects of it that I like, but I'm not bowled over with it. I'm not over the moon with it. It's one of those ones where I really gotta probably revisit and really come to grips with how I feel, because it was so different than what I had in my head going into it. I think that kind of led me astray a little bit during watching it.
Yeah, you may revisit it and feel
a little bit different.
Yeah,
if I knew what I was getting into, right? And sometimes, it helps to have your expectations. Sometimes it hurts and all that kind of stuff.
I agree.
So you said this is your third time, not 3.5 times watching it.
Oh, it might be. I don't know. No, it's the third time.
So what was your feeling about 8.5 going into this watch, and did that change, or what did you feel like after watching it?
Yeah, so I first saw this movie when I was probably 23 or 24, something like that, and I feel like I say that a lot on the show. I'm like, I watched all these movies when I was like in my early 20s, because at that time I was trying to devour all these different foreign films and older kind of black and white films that I had not seen before. And back then, it kind of pains me to say this, but back then I feel like I was a much more creative person when I was younger. Now I'm just old and don't do much of anything. I feel like, except work or whatever. I don't feel nearly as creative as I used to be. But back when I was that age, I was very much into film. I hung out with tons of people that were all into film. We would sit around and discuss movies. We would meet at the coffee house or whatever and talk about movies that we'd seen. We talked about making movies. We talked about story ideas. We talked about all these things. So when I first saw this movie, I was fascinated by it, because I was really struck by how much it spoke to me then. Mm-hmm. Because again, not like I'm like Guido's character. I didn't, have all these beautiful women or anything, that I was running around with or anything like that. But I wasn't a filmmaker either, but it still, it felt like, it felt very relatable to me, because I knew, at least, even though I wasn't a filmmaker, I knew at least what it felt like to try and come up with an idea and to try and come up with, and I feel like most people know that, right? I mean, you've, in school, you did an art project, or you did something, even if you don't consider yourself a creative person, or you don't feel like you're that creative, I'm sure at some point, just about everybody in their life, given that they have the capability, has done something creative, even if they felt like it sucked. So I feel like, people at least have a taste of what that's like. Whether or not you do that for a living is another story. But when I first saw this, I was like, gosh, this feels really, modern. It felt, again, very relatable to me. I felt like, I know what it means to, to try and come up with ideas. And because when you come up with ideas, and I know, you've created things in the past, whether it's music or film or something like that, you draw from your own personal experiences. And you might base this character on somebody that or you might base this girl on an old girlfriend, or this, older woman on your mother or something. You base things on what you know. You write what you know, you come up with what you know. So I feel like obviously that's, very prevalent in this movie. You have him, as you said, having all these kind of flights of fancy, these daydreams, where his his mind is kind of intersecting with reality, and it's not always clear. Sometimes it's a bit surreal as to what's happening. I mean, I don't think that it's hard to understand or anything like that, but that's kind of how I felt about it back in the late '90s or whatever. Back then, I really really liked it. Seeing it now, unfortunately, because I don't feel as creative, I still like this film a great deal. It
Age has
doesn't.
worn us down.
Well, yeah, kind of. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, I don't want to say it doesn't blow me away, because I still think this film is an excellent movie, and I still, when I watched it, I never get bored with it, and I didn't get bored with it, when I was watching it. In fact, I watched it one day, and then I thought about it so much over the next couple of days, I fired it back up.
Oh, interesting.
And I didn't watch it again, but I watched several scenes from it again, just to kind of because I like a lot of the imagery in the movie. First of all, I like the fact that, and we talked about this when we did Umbrellas of Cherbourg, I feel like even though it's not an action movie, the camera's always moving. It's moving side to side, or it's dialing forward, or it's dialing backward, or something like that. So you never get the. And again, I'm not saying that you need to have movies where the camera just sits still. Sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes it's not. Shaky cam is generally bad to me. But in this movie, I feel like it has a fluidity to it, both with the music, with the acting. You've got a lot of overlapping dialogue. You've got a lot of dialogue that's very kind of rapid fire and maybe not necessarily overlapping. But, this person says, like, what do you think about this? It cuts to Guido. He says, this, and it cuts to his wife, and she's doing this, and she's smoking, and, the little guy that's in love with her comes up and, starts talking to her or whatever. But you have this. It feels like this movie moves, really, really moves, even though it's over 2 hours long. I don't feel like it gets boring. But yeah, I mean, I still like it now. It makes me a little sad again, because I'm not the young man that I once was, filled with, I feel like, all the promise in the world. Now I feel like, I don't know, I mean, again, it makes it sound like I'm unhappy or something like that. I'm not unhappy, but watching this movie, it makes me think about how I felt when I originally saw it, and I'm like, those were the days. But no, I still like this movie quite a bit. I haven't seen... Honestly, I've seen La Dolce Vita, but outside of La Dolce Vita and 8.5, I'm not sure if I've seen any other Fellini films. So maybe I should get on that. I don't know. But I like both of them. I've only seen La Dolce Vita once, so I don't remember a whole lot about it. But 8.5, of course, now seeing it 3 times, obviously it's a lot fresher in my mind. But I think that this is a movie that... I've known plenty of people, and I know you've known plenty of people, that they don't want to watch movies that are older. They don't want to watch movies that are black and white. They don't want to watch movies that are foreign. And here you've got the trifecta. It's older, it's black and white, and it's in Italian. And if you don't speak Italian, you're forced to read subtitles. So people are like, I don't want to watch it. But I do feel like, you can get a lot out of this movie. Again, sure, it takes place in the 1960s. It was made in the early 1960s. It's not modern necessarily, but I feel like, just like reading, like an old book in English class or something, kids complain. I know I complain. Like, why do I have to read the Scarlet Letter? This was written in 1850. What does it have to do with me? But I feel like if you haven't seen 8.5, because I don't feel like we've spoiled much of it. If you haven't seen 8.5, I feel like it's worth your time. And because I do feel like it's relatable, whether or not you feel like you're a creative person or not. I think it gives you a good kind of insight into somebody who's an artist who is struggling with what they want to say. They've got all these people that are nipping at their heels. You've got to make this movie. What are we going to do about this? And they built this huge, elaborate spaceship, rocket ship kind of set, which I really love that part of the movie, because it's cool. They go there at night, and it's got this like spooky kind of music playing in the background, like an old science fiction, like The Day the Earth Stood Still or something like that is going
like
on.
The 50s B movie kind of.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't. Yeah, it sounds a bit like a theremin. Yeah, it's very kind of spooky. But I really like that scene, and I really like the ending of this film with kind of his resolution to. And again, now we are getting into spoiler territory, where I think it's perfect, because they're like, hey, we're going to kick this movie off, and we're going to do it at the launch pad, which is appropriate because they're launching the movie. But he is like, I don't want to do this movie anymore. My wife hates me, and, I've got this mistress, and I've got all these things. So he kind of fantasizes about getting a gun and killing himself. obviously he does. It's not literal. He doesn't actually do that, although it does kind of show that in the film. But then he basically just calls the movie off, and the critic that he's hired to kind of help him with the script basically gives this speech about, yeah, it's good that you don't want to do this movie because we've got basically bad art always trying to make its way into our world, and we have to stamp that out before it begins, because otherwise it's this abomination that creeps into our atmosphere, and you don't want that. He says it. I'm paraphrasing whatever he says, but he kind of says that. And then you have Marcello's character Guido basically thinking his thoughts about. He's like, okay, this pressure is off of me now. I feel like I can go back to my wife. I can have a life with her. I don't need all of this stuff. And his wife hears his thoughts because she responds. And if you think back to earlier in the film, the guy with the top hat, who's kind of like a mentalist, who can project thoughts into other people. Yeah. Again, it's meant to be surreal. It's not meant to be, it's ambiguous. It's not meant to be taken literal. But I like that she responds to him and she's like, I don't know if what you're saying is true, but, we can try, basically. And all of these people that have, his mother, his father, Saragina, who's like the voluptuous woman that the children paid on the beach to do the rumba, they're all there and they all form a circle in this, because Fellini's obsessed with circuses and whatnot. Yeah. So they form this, this circle in this kind of circusy tent like kind of thing. It's not covered, but and they just kind of do a little parade, and that's where the movie ends. And you got Nino Rota's bouncy score going on, and you've got basically a manifestation of him as a kid playing the flute, I think. Except now instead of wearing a black kind of cape, he's wearing a white suit and like a white cape. So it's Fellini-esque. What can I say? I don't know. I guess there's a reason why that adjective was coined for him. But no, I really enjoy this movie, and I feel like it makes you think, and I think that's the best thing I can say about it is that I did watch it because it is streaming on HBO Max right now in the TCM hub if you want to look for it. But I streamed it, and I really thought about it over the next couple of days, and I thought about those scenes, the ending, and when they go to the launch pad, and the dream or the kind of daydream that he has with the harem and everything, where the older women have to go upstairs once they reach 30 or whatever. It's crazy, but no, I like this movie. I feel like I talked for like 20 minutes, but I do like this movie.
I'm glad. Yeah, it gives me a better perspective on what I saw, right?
Yeah,
and
I hope.
Yeah, no, it does, and it gives me some things to think about my next watching on it, because I did not, again, all the surrealness of it just kind of really threw me out more than anything.
Yeah.
And it's not something I really embraced in watching. So I think kind of, listening to that kind of warms me up to the idea of, watching it again with all that and kind of taking all that stuff in,
Yeah, and I think, probably watch La Dolce Vita and kind of see where you fall on that, and then maybe revisit 8.5 whenever.
Yeah.
In 8.5 years.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. It's like it, but instead of coming every 20 years, it's every 8.5 years.
There
you have to watch it.
There you go.
That'll be fun.
All right, mark your calendar. So in 2030, well, we're in May of 2022. So in 6 months, November of 2030. There you go.
Time to watch.
Mark it down. Again. Set your calendar. All right.
Or the It Clown will come get us.
That's right. Pennywise is going to get you. So this movie has a musical that's based on it. The musical came out in 1982 on Broadway or off Broadway, something like that. But the musical is called Nine. And do you know why it's called Nine?
They rounded up?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't write the composer's name down, but he said basically, if you take 8.5 and you add music to it, you get another half. So you 9. But it took, 27 years. If I did my math correctly, it took 27 years to bring it to the screen. But 9 was brought to the screen in 2009.
No, it's got to be 29 years. So
27, 1982. 27. 2009.
63. You have to add.
No, I'm talking about the musical though. The musical came out in 82. Oh. So 27 years later, it was made into a film.
Gotcha.
Directed by Rob Marshall, who did Chicago.
Oh wait, so that 9 is based off the musical that's based off of this?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting. I remember when that 9 came out.
Yeah.
Because that was
Well-
like after Chicago was like his big thing.
It's kind of confusing because 2009 had 2 movies come out called
Yeah, the
Nine.
animated
One is
movie.
the animated
Yep,
movie,
yep.
but it's the number 9, and then you have the musical 9, which is Nine spelled out. So
Interesting. Oh, I didn't
yeah,
know
the
that.
musical has Daniel Day-Lewis as the Guido character. I can't remember if his name's Guido. I think it is. But anyway, this movie, 8.5, 1963, nominated for Best Director, lost to Tony Richardson for Tom Jones. Tom Jones starred Albert Finney, who was married at one time to Anouk Amy, who's in 8.5. She plays Guido's wife. It was nominated for Best Original Screenplay. It lost to the Cinerama film How the West Was Won. It was nominated for Best Black and White Art Direction, but it lost to Elia Kazan's America, America. And I'm not unhappy about that because I think America, America is a fantastic film. It did win, 8.5 that is, it did win Best Foreign Language Film, and it won Best Black and White Costume Design. It is, as I said, it's streaming on HBO Max. If you care to check it out or revisit it, it is 98% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, 92% audience. Roger Ebert gives it 4 stars, and Leonard Maltin gives it 4 stars.
Yeah, I'm definitely in the minority on that one.
There you go. Well, it's not like you hated it.
No, I didn't hate it. It wasn't what I was expecting.
Yeah.
Just some cognitive
This is not a bomb to you.
No,
it's not a Leonard Maltin bomb.
No.
All right.
We just made me think of the movie that was a Leonard Maltin bomb to us, which was
Earthquake?
no, the Vin Diesel terrible.
Oh, Find Me Guilty.
Find Me Guilty.
Oh.
All right. Well, on these Monday episodes, we always like to talk about what we've been watching. So I'm going to ask you, Andy, have you been watching anything interesting lately?
I watched 2 things based on 8.5. One of them was 9,
Yeah,
which I just talked about, the musical.
I'm kind of curious about checking that out. So what'd you think about 9?
It's okay. I know that it was not well received by critics, but I think it's. I mean, it was interesting. I actually watched 8.5, and probably like 2 hours later, I watched 9. I watched them both in the same day. So 8.5 was very, very fresh in my mind. So seeing kind of a musical version of 8.5 was very interesting to me.
Yeah.
So close together. Daniel Day-Lewis is not really a singer, and fortunately, he doesn't really sing that much in this musical. But the supporting cast is Penelope Cruz plays his mistress in this. Marion Cotillard plays his wife. Judi Dench is kind of a new character. She's not really in the original film. She's basically like a costume designer, but like a buddy of his. She has a number. Sophia Loren plays his mother. Fergie plays Saragina.
Oh, interesting.
And Kate Hudson plays like a sexy reporter that interviews him, and of course they sleep together, and she has a number. But just about everybody has their own kind of musical number in this. I liked Penelope Cruz's number a lot, and honestly my favorite musical number in the movie is Fergie's. And I'm not a Fergie fan, nor am I a Black Eyed Peas fan.
Right.
But I actually liked her musical number the best.
Was it Fergalicious?
It was Fergalicious, yeah. It's called Be Italian. But I thought it was cool. So I think don't expect Chicago, because I know we both like Chicago. It's not nearly in the same league as Chicago.
Yeah.
But it's okay. I mean, I would say it's worth a watch, especially, again, you've just seen 8.5, so it's kind of fresh in your mind. If you watch 9, before too long, and before 8.5 completely leaves your mind, you might like it. You might get something out of it.
Right.
Again, not great, not terrible, just kind of in between.
So you watched 9.
I watched 9, and what was the other movie I watched? Oh, yeah, it was Stardust Memories, which is basically Woody Allen's version of 8.5. So Woody Allen did Manhattan, which is in black and white.
Yep.
He did Stardust Memories, which is in black and white. And I believe Zelig is black and white. So those 3 movies kind of back to back to back, if I'm not mistaken. Stardust Memories, I thought was good. It's similar to 8.5, but it's not identical to it. So basically, once again, Woody Allen basically plays himself.
Yep.
He is a filmmaker who goes to the Stardust Hotel. This one's called Stardust Memories. He goes to the Stardust Hotel because they're doing a retrospective of his movies, and he is there kind of to do a panel Q&A kind of thing. And while he's there, he thinks about, past loves, and he's got a woman kind of like Carla in 8.5 that comes to visit him at the hotel, although she's not technically his mistress, because I don't think he's really involved with anybody. He was previously involved with a Charlotte Rampling character, a character that Charlotte Rampling plays, but I don't think they're still together. And then, of course, he kind of has eyes for this other girl that's like a classical violinist that happens to be staying at the hotel. But again, it's beautifully shot, black and white, looks cool. They shot it in New Jersey, so it's like at like the boardwalk kind of area, seaside kind of hotel. So It's funny. I mean, I laughed a lot. I thought it's good, and it's like an hour and a half tops.
That's
Pretty
cool.
short. It's brisk. So I liked it.
Very cool.
And that's what I've been watching.
All right. So
What about you?
9 Stardust Memories.
9 Stardust Memories. Yeah.
I watched a movie that you talked about. I think it's been a few weeks now since you came up, and it was The Tall Man.
Yes.
And we've talked about it because there's not been a whole lot that I've watched these last couple weeks. I
was favorable on
You're
it.
favorable on it. I think the movie Tall Man is divisive, right?
Yeah.
I think there's people that really like it and people that don't really like it.
Yeah.
I like the premise of it. So the premise of the Tall Man, and I'm not gonna spoil it for you. I think it's interesting. I think it's a interesting take. Maybe that's a little bit of a spoiler on that genre, but I think that's cool. For me, the movie is just the execution was poor, and it just felt really slow to me the whole time. And I felt like I was ahead of all the characters, and I knew kind of what was going to happen, or I knew like the broad strokes, and I just kept on. It was waiting for the movie to catch up to where I was with it. So that made the movie feel even more languid and more slow. So
Yeah.
I would like to see, I think the filmmaker has done, because he did something in a Ghostland, right?
Incident in a Ghostland. Yeah.
And that's pretty well received, right?
Yeah, I didn't like it, but I respected kind of
Yeah.
him trying to do something different. And he's done Martyrs, which neither one of us have seen, but is fairly well received,
Yeah.
I think.
So I'm curious to check those two out based off of this. But for me, again, I just felt like it could have just been sped up a little bit more or something. That's really what struck me in watching was just how slow and how languid it was. And I just really just wanted it to kind of hurry up and get to the point and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily for me, but I
Yeah,
appreciate
and I mean, I can see what you're saying. I think, again, and because I like The Tall Man, although I definitely see what you're saying. I didn't really like Incident in Ghostland, but I think both of them are worth seeing just because, again, I like that when he makes a film, at least of the two that I've seen, that when he makes a film, I feel like he's trying to do something different, kind of with the thriller or the horror genre. Sometimes he succeeds, like he succeeded for me in The Tall Man, did not succeed for you. Sometimes he fails, like you haven't seen this in a Ghostland. He failed in that to me, but I give him credit.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we've been watching. So we watched a movie this week about the filmmaking process, and what did you decide to pair that with?
Yeah, so I had a few options. One of them was Stardust Memories, and I initially was going to do Stardust Memories with Woody Allen, but I decided to go a different route. I almost went with another film that came out in 1963. This is the Jean-Luc Godard film starring Brigitte Bardot and Jack Palance, actually. It's called Contempt. It's also about a guy who's having some marital problems that is trying to make a film in Europe. But I ultimately went with, because I kind of wanted to shine a spotlight on a documentary that was very well received when it came out back in 1999, but I feel like I don't want to say forgotten now, because it's definitely not forgotten, but I don't hear as many people talk about it or that have necessarily heard of it. It does not have a Blu-ray release at this point, so it's DVD, VHS, and I didn't see where it was streaming.
Look at you, Severn Films.
Yeah, I didn't see where it was streaming anywhere, but it is it's a documentary, not a fiction film. It's a documentary about another guy who's trying to make a film. He's not quite Marcello Mastroianni. It's Mark Borchardt starring in the documentary American Movie. We'll talk about that on Wednesday.
All right. Stay tuned for that on Wednesday, like Andy said. Well, that was everything 8.5 more. Let us know what you think about 8.5 down in the comments below. If you want us to read excerpts of Kirby's 30-page dissertation about it, maybe we can do that.
I'd like to read that.
I asked for it. She won't let me read it for whatever reason.
Huh.
But so she's a big fan of the movie. So let us know down below. Stay tuned on Wednesday when we watch American Movie. Please like, subscribe, share, do all that social media stuff, and we'll see you then on Wednesday. Have a good one. Bye.